Hi everyone. Our project is titled Who Gets to Work? Language, Systems, and Subaltern Positioning of International Students in Australia's Part-Time Labor Market. And at the beginning of this presentation, we would like to acknowledge the support and guidance of the teaching staff in Linguistics 7006 and extend our sincere thanks to our interview participants for generously sharing their experiences. Rather than simply asking why international students struggle to find jobs, we ask a deeper question. How does the system decide who is employable? Let's begin with a simple idea. What does an ideal worker look like? In Australian part-time labor market, this often means fluent English, local experience, and certain communication styles. These may seem neutral, but in reality, they shape access to opportunities. As Chen suggests, language is not just a tool for communication, but can function as a mechanism of exclusion. So the question becomes, who is excluded from this definition of the ideal worker? To explore this, we shift our focus from individuals to systems. We ask, who defines what counts as a qualified worker? How do language visa policies and hiring systems shape access to work? And how are international students positioned as less employable? Research shows that hiring is not purely based on ability. For example, applicants with English-sounding names are more likely to receive interview callbacks. This suggests that employability is shaped even before interaction begins. To understand this, we look at how employability is constructed. At the level of discourse, terms like fluent English and local experience act as signals of legitimacy, defining who appears competent. At the institutional level, international students face visa restrictions, while employers prefer stable and locally familiar workers. These factors often overlap to create structural barriers. So what we see here is that the labor market does not simply evaluate workers. It produces categories of value, determining who is employable and who is marginalized. And once these categories are established, they shape how opportunities are distributed in practice. So next, we'll look at how these processes operate through different hiring pathways.
Now, I will focus on how access to part-time job is structured for international students. Although there are different ways to find jobs, access to this opportunity is not equal. Entry into the labor market is shaped by several barriers, including English requirements, expectation of local experience, and visa restrictions. Because of these barriers, international students are not simply choosing between different job options. Instead, they're often limited in where they can apply and what kind of jobs they can realistically access. As a result, they're more likely to be concentrated in low-paid, less secure, and less visible forms of work. These structural conditions are reflected in the lived experience of international students. To illustrate this, we conducted interviews about their job experience.
Have you ever been refused a job because of your English or accent?
Well, I actually have ever been rejected to some jobs, but I don't think that it's because of my language or my accent or my cultural background. Mostly they just send me an email of like, sorry, we don't accept you. So, but it's not really necessary about language or culture.
The second question, did your visa limit your job choices or make you get lower pay?
I think that because I have my visa is a student visa, right? So I really find hard to get a job because I need to see all the requirements, and then it must be like part-time, not full-time job, something like that. And then what else? About the salary, I think they really clear put the information in the website or even in the application said that the salary will be in this high, and I think it's acceptable, and I don't find that it is lower or higher. So it's just standard of their salary.
Do you feel excluded or isolated when finding jobs? Is that related to culture or language?
Yeah, I think that some jobs that I applied, they really required someone who is Australian citizens. Well, I think I'm qualified to the job, but they just don't accept international students or something like that.
Have you ever been refused a job because of your English or accent?
From this
Well,
interview,
I
we can
actually
see
have
three
ever
key
been
themes:
rejected to
visa
some
limitations,
jobs, but I don't
restricted
think that it's
access to
because
job
of my
opportunities,
language
and a
or
sense
my
of being
accent or
perceived
my
as less
cultural
qualified.
background.
These responses suggest that
Mostly just send
international
me an
students are not
email of
only
like,
limited by
sorry, we
formal
don't accept
conditions
you.
like visa
So,
rules,
it's
but
not
also
really
by how they are
necessary
viewed
about language.
and evaluated in the labor market. To further understand their working conditions, we also ask about pay and whether they could respond to unfair treatment. Have you experienced unfair salary because you are international students?
Yes, I think so. I once worked in a Greek restaurant. My salary is actually like lower than those people who are local or holding the working holiday visa. I think my visa status make me like seem like had fewer chances.
If you're treated unfairly, do you dare to complain?
I think it depends, but when I was like working in the Greek restaurant, my boss like scolded me for no reason, and I didn't receive my salary like for a month. I didn't dare to complain because first of all, I'm not sure about like what kinds of channels could I use to help myself, and secondly, I know it takes like a lot of time and energy to deal with this kind of thing, and the problem is that I really want my salary back. If I do that, I'm not sure whether I would get my salary back or not, and also, I'm not really familiar with the legal process here. That's why I don't dare to complain. But and also, like one of my friends, she's working in some retail shop, and she encountered a situation of like something like harassment, and she told me that she was afraid of complaining too because she was holding a working holiday visa, and she was afraid that she would lose this job. Losing this job means she's not going to pay her rent or something like that. That's why I think it depends. It's really hard for us to do the complaint if we are not local or not having too much support here.
Have you experienced unfair salary because you are international
From
students?
this interview, it becomes clear that
Yes,
visa
I think
restrictions
so.
not
I
only
once
limits
worked
working
in a
hours,
Greek
but also
restaurant.
increase
My
vulnerability
salary
to
is
unfair
actually
conditions.
like lower
At the
than
same
those
time, many
people
students
who
fear
are
that they lack the
local
time
or
and
holding
resources to
the
challenge
working
the
holiday
situation,
visa.
which make it
I
difficult to
think
speak
my
up.
visa
These are not just
status
individual
make me
difficulties,
like
but
seem like
reflect
had
broader
fewer
structure
chances.
inequality. For this experience can be understood more clearly through meaning making. First, language is not just a tool for communication, but a marker of value and legitimacy. As seen in the interviews, English proficiency becomes the key criterion for judging employability. Second, visa conditions create vulnerability and dependency. Because working hours are restricted, international students have fewer choice and are more likely to accept unfavorable conditions. Third, the body becomes a site of labor. Many students are engaged in physically demanding work such as catering or delivery jobs, which often involve fatigue and limited mobility. At the same time, space reflects inequality. International students are more likely to be placed in backstage roles, where their work is less visible and less valued. Finally, silence reflects limited power. The fact that some students do not dare to complain shows how structure constraints restrict their ability to speak up. Overall, this shows how broader structures are not abstract, but are lived through language, the body, space, and everyday practices. To understand this more clearly, we can now look at how different hiring pathways operate in practice.
So from what we've discussed in interviews so far, these systems don't just shape access to jobs, they shape who get recognized as employable. So building on that, I will look at how this plays out across different hiring systems. Instead of just asking what jobs are available, we need to look at how access itself is structured. So here we compare two common hiring pathways. On the one hand, the mainstream labor market. Platforms like Seek, where fluent English and culture fit are expected. The system looks fair, but it filters people out early, especially those who don't meet implicit expectations. On the other hand, informal networks like WeChat groups or referrals rely more on trust and lower language barriers, but these jobs are often less secure, with lower pay and limited mobility. So even though the systems seem different, they lead to similar outcomes. Research shows that accent bias affects how employable second language speakers are perceived to be. So the key point here is about different systems, but both reproduce inequality. So given all this, are students just passively affected or do they actively respond? In reality, students actively navigate these challenges. They share job information, support each other, and develop strategies for interviews and job searching. But this agency don't remove the inequality. It helps them manage it. Studies show that linguistic discrimination can cause anxiety, low self-esteem, and social exclusion. So what we see here is a balance. The structural inequality remains, but students create support systems within it. So at this point, we also need to reflect our own role. We're not the outside observers. Many of us, just international students or closely connected to the experiences, we've faced similar challenges like job searching, language expectations, and exclusion. So our perspectives are shaped by the same system we analyze. We're not outside the system, we're part of it. So bringing all this together, being subaltern is not about identity, it's about position. International students are not naturally disadvantaged. Their position is shaped by language, visa policies, and hiring practices. And these systems shape both access to opportunities and how people are valued. Based on Melbo's framework, inequality is not natural. It is produced through the socio-semiotic and material systems. We see this clearly in hiring, where something like accent, and where seems neutral but creates unequal opportunities. So ultimately, the subaltern positioning is not given, it is actually produced. Finally, we edit and present the references that informed our analysis. So thank you very much for listening. That's all for our group presentation.